Translation in purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Since our bodies are made of sattva gun, we, the demigods, are internally and externally situated in goodness. All the great saints are also situated in that way. Therefore, if even we cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, what is to be said of those who are most insignificant in their bodily constitutions, being situated in the modes of passion and ignorance? How can they understand the Lord? Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto Him. Atheists and demons cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although He is situated within everyone. For them, the Lord finally appears in the form of death, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Mrityu sarva haraschaham. Atheists think that they are independent, and therefore they do not care about the supremacy of the Lord. Yet the Lord asserts His supremacy when He overcomes them as death. At the time of death, their attempts to use their so-called scientific knowledge and philosophical speculation to deny the supremacy of the Lord cannot work. Hiranyakashipu, for example, was an exalted representative of the atheistic class of men. He always challenged the existence of God, and thus he became inimical even toward his own son. Everyone was afraid of Hiranyakashipu's atheistic principles. Nonetheless, when Lord Nrsingadev appeared in order to kill him, Hiranyakashipu's atheistic principles could not save him. Lord Nrsingadev killed Hiranyakashipu and took away all his power, influence and pride. Atheistic men, however, never understand how everything they create is annihilated. The supersoul is situated within them, but because of the predominance of the modes of passion and ignorance, they cannot understand the supremacy of the Lord. Even the demigods, the devotees, who are transcendentally situated, or situated on the platform of goodness, are not fully aware of the qualities and position of the Lord. How then can the demons and atheists understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead? It is not possible. Therefore, to gain this understanding, the demigods, headed by Lord Brahma, offered their respectful obeisances to the Lord. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhambitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaura Bhakta Brinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'd like to request the blessings of the Vaishnavas that we can say something to benefit everyone. So, we're at Canto 8, and the first thing that came to my mind was I wanted to remind myself as to where exactly we were in terms of the storyline. So the first 4 chapters of the canto discuss the liberation of Gajendra, the elephant. And the 5th chapter, goes on to describe more about the constant, ongoing, eternal battle between the demigods and the demons. So it describes how they're constantly fighting. And earlier in this chapter, we find that the demigods are defeated by the demons. They're defeated because essentially of their leaders' ignorance and pride. It's described in an earlier purport by Srila Prabhupada that Indra, due to his pride, wasn't able to pay proper respects to the very feared Durvasa Muni. So Indra was riding on his elephant on one occasion, and Durvasa Muni saw Indra on his elephant and was very pleased to see him and offered his garland to Indra. And Indra took the garland but didn't really respect the garland. He put it on his elephant's trunk. And the elephant, not realizing the value of this Mahaprashadam from an exalted devotee, an exalted Brahmana, the elephant took the garland and trampled on it. In this way, Durvasa Muni became very angry, and he cursed him that all of his riches would be gone. And so for this reason, the demigods were defeated by the demons. And in this defeated state, the demigods approached Lord Brahma and asked him for advice, asked him what to do. And so at the moment, we see a conversation between the demigods and Lord Brahma. And what we'll see in oncoming verses, texts, we'll see that they collectively, the demigods, Lord Brahma and everyone else, they approach Kshirodakshay Vishnu on the milk ocean, and they pray to him for advice. And then in later chapters we'll see the churning of the milk ocean and the appearance of the Lord as Mohini Murti. But Prabhupada in the purport, he really hones in onto this atheistic mentality. The atheistic mentality that we see so prevalent today. This Sunday I was delivering the Explore course, and it was the second session of the Explore course. So if anyone's attended the course, and if anyone hasn't, we recommend it. Small plug there. But the second session is all about whether God exists. When I was doing some research, I came across something very interesting. There's a statement and a notion which is going on, especially in the atheistic world, that Google is God. Google is the new God. So forget about Radha Gokulananda, forget about Radha and Krishna, forget about Vishnu or any other type of God. Google is God. And so I looked this up, and actually there's a church of Google. There's a church for Google today. And I was astounded. There's actually they have 9 statements, 9 proofs for Google being God, or at least a better God than any other type of God that's out there. So I've got these 9 proofs, and I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. If you analyze them, they're weak, but it's interesting to what lengths people go to establish various atheistic notions. So the first proof is that Google is omniscient, all-knowing. And they established that by saying there's 9.5 billion web pages which has information from all over the world. Anything that you want to find, you will find on Google. Therefore, it is the source of all knowledge. Proof 2. Google is everywhere. He's omnipresent. So you can host Google, you can log on to Google from anywhere in the world, from any corner in the world. Therefore, it's omnipresent. The third proof is that Google answers your prayers. It says that whatever question or problem is plaguing you, you can turn to Google and Google will have an answer. If you're going through some problems in life, you turn to Google, and surely there'll be something which can help you. Proof 4. Google is potentially immortal. So it's not a physical being like us. It doesn't die. And theoretically, at least, Google can last forever. If you have the servers and the technology in place, then there's no reason why Google cannot last forever. It's immortal. Proof 5. Google is infinite. Theoretically, Google can grow forever. Proof 6. Google remembers all. Because apparently, Google caches every single web page that has ever existed. So everything is in the memory. So if you ever type anything, if you ever publish a website, Google will remember everything. Proof 7. Google doesn't do any evil. It's omnibenevolent. Because apparently it's in Google's corporate philosophy that they can make no money without being... That a company can make... Yes, so the philosophy is that a company can make no money without evil. Proof 8. Apparently, the term Google is searched more times than any of the terms God, Jesus, Allah, Buddha, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Judaism combined. So Google is more searched for than any of those terms. And the final proof is that the evidence of Google is abundant. There's no real evidence of God, but Google is everywhere. And you can very easily see Google and experience Google. Whereas obviously the notion here is that you cannot do the same for God. But I was reflecting on Google, and what does Google really provide us? What does it really give to us? It gives us information, not knowledge. The Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam as scriptures actually give us knowledge. Because what is real knowledge? Knowledge is insights. Knowledge is techniques which can ultimately free us from this body, which can ultimately help us to re-establish a loving, eternal relationship as servants of Krishna. And that is real knowledge. All Google can really provide us with is information. And so there are many techniques which are given in the Bhagavad Gita, but in 13.8 or 12 we find that there are many qualities of a Vaishnava which are given. And these are key techniques which can help us to become self-realized. And as Prabhupada is explaining, in 13.8 to 12 it's described Janna Mrityu Jara Vyadi Dukkha Darshanu Darshanam. That actually one who realizes the fact that we will all experience birth, old age, disease and death, and can actually take to a path by which we can transcend those problems of life, those real problems of life. That is real knowledge. That is real knowledge. And so the atheistic mentality is really very much flawed. Walt Disney is an interesting example. In the late 1920s, Walt Disney was very aged, coming towards death. And of course he was a millionaire, very, very rich. And so he employed various scientists to engage in research. And he wanted his body to be frozen and therefore kept intact. And his idea was that he'd employ scientists to research into a cure for death. And he had the belief, he had the faith, that scientists will be able to find the cure for death, a physical cure, a scientific cure for death. So he wanted his body to be preserved, and when they found the cure, his body could be brought back to life. This was his idea. So for a long time after he died, his body was preserved in this way. Scientists were trying to find the cure, and they were using up his fortune. So eventually his family took his body out of preservation, and they cut off the funds to the scientists, because obviously they wanted to enjoy his fortune. But this mood, this understanding, or this lack of understanding exhibited by Walt Disney is really symptomatic of society today, of the world today. That actually birth, old age, disease and death are problems that no one can transcend, no one can overcome through any material means. actually the only way to overcome this problem once and for all is to actually become God conscious. Throughout scripture we see this atheistic mentality in many different ways. Duryodhana in the Mahabharata is a key example of this atheistic mentality. And due to this atheistic mentality, very often we become blinded. People become blinded due to this atheistic mentality. And this was definitely the case with Duryodhana. There was one incident where he was hosting Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni always had his entourage of 60,000 disciples. So wherever he went, his disciples went with him. But of course, Duryodhana was in Hastinapur with a huge kingdom and huge opulence. So he could look after Durvasa Muni very nicely. At the same time, Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, they were in exile. So they were living very simply in a place in Vrindavan called Vimalakund. And Yudhishthira Maharaj, although he was living very simply, he had a great desire to serve those around him, the Brahmanas, those people who were helping and serving him and his brothers. So he prayed, and the sun god fulfilled his prayer. He gave him a mystical plate. And the idea of this plate was that anything that Draupadi cooked, when placed in this plate, would be unlimited. Only when Draupadi had eaten herself and washed the plate would the prasad actually finish. So this was the boon. Anything that she cooked would be unlimited. She could feed unlimited numbers of people. So Duryodhana was aware of this fact. He was aware of what time she cooked, what time she served, what time she cooked herself. So when Durvasa Muni was leaving, he began to glorify the cooking of Draupadi. And he began to say that the Pandavas would be very happy to serve you and all of your disciples. And this was obviously a plan that he had hatched, knowing that they wouldn't have any food, because he sent Durvasa Muni at the right time. So Durvasa Muni was very interested by this proposal. So he approached Vimalakund and he went to the home of the Pandavas. And he said, "Please feed me and my 60,000 disciples." And so Yudhishthira Maharaj said, "Yes, of course." So Durvasa Muni went to bathe in Vimalakund, and Yudhishthira Maharaj was very alarmed, naturally. What to do? Everyone had eaten, the Pandavas had eaten, Draupadi had eaten, and the plate was washed. Had no idea what to do. So everyone gathered together, and they were lost. What shall we do? So Draupadi's solution was very instructive. Her solution, very often when we're worried, when we don't know what to do, when we're lost, we look for some material solution. But Draupadi did nothing but turn to the Lord. Just as she eventually, in the court of Hastinapur, when she was being disrobed by Dusashan, she turned eventually to Krishna. In this situation, automatically she turned to Krishna. And she prayed very, very earnestly to Krishna with all her heart. And she said, "Krishna, what shall we do? Please save us." Because everyone, of course, is very scared of the curse of Durvasa Muni. So Krishna, very instantly he heard this prayer. Krishna was in Dwarka with Rukmini. And when he heard this earnest prayer of Draupadi, Krishna ran. He ran to Vimalakund. And he came there. His hair was dishevelled, he wasn't dressed properly, he was out of breath because he'd been running. And he came to help. So he said to Draupadi, he didn't need the situation to be explained, of course, he's all-knowing. So Draupadi said, "What shall we do?" So Krishna said, "Bring me the plate." And Draupadi said, "But there's no use, I've already washed the plate, everyone's eaten." But Krishna said, "Bring me the plate." So she brought the plate, and beneath the plate there was 1 grain of rice. Just 1 grain of rice left. And so Krishna took that grain of rice and he ate it. And of course Krishna is the soul of all souls. So he ate that grain of rice, and with that grain of rice, everyone in the entire universe was at that point satisfied, including Durvasa Muni and his 60,000 disciples. So Yudhishthira Maharaj sent Nakul to bring Durvasa Muni. But Durvasa Muni was automatically satisfied. And so he could do nothing but leave satisfied. But he was confused. What happened? At one point he was so hungry, and then he was so satisfied. So from this we can learn, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, Kauntaya pratijanihi namai bhaktya pranashyati. He asks Arjun, he says, Arjun, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. So whatever situation we may be in, even if the atheists may be trying to perpetrate so many terrible activities against the devotees, if a devotee truly and earnestly takes shelter of the Lord, then no one can do anything. No one can do anything. Ultimately, we have to take shelter of the holy name. One of the devotees recently was away. He was telling me a story, one of the brahmacharis. He said that he was walking down the road and a cat was following them. So he was following, the cat was following, and it started meowing like a cat does. Meow, meow. And Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki, Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki. So the cat obviously wanted attention. And the devotee said the cat was so cute, and he started to pet the cat and stroke it. And then he started chanting Hare Krishna to the cat. And the devotees, there were a pair of them, they carried on walking. And the cat still followed. And so again they turned around and they chanted Hare Krishna to the cat. And then about 20 minutes later the cat was still following them. It went across the road and the cat got run over. The cat got run, and they actually observed this. So 1 minute they're chanting Hare Krishna and the cat then was run over. But after being run over, the cat was still alive. There was still some life. And somehow they're close to the temple. They got some tilak. They got a tulsi garland. Some Ganga water. And they gave it a real Vaishnav sending off. Amazing story, amazing pastime. And so of course this cat will gain so much benefit simply from the holy name. And in that way became a Vaishnav. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when the residents of Kulinagram, they asked him on a few occasions, what is a Vaishnav? And the first definition that is given is a very simple definition. Anyone who hears or chants the holy name of Krishna, he is a Vaishnav. So by the chanting, the sincere chanting of those devotees, that cat became a Vaishnav, and so was given a very wonderful Vaishnav sending off. And so, of course, we know that Krishna marike rakeke, Krishna rakeke marike, that when someone is going to die, then no one can save them. If Krishna wants that person to die, and if Krishna wants that person to stay, then no one can kill them. So this was a nice story of how, what a wonderful Vaishnav sending off. I also wanted to talk a little about Ramanujacharya, because of course 3 days ago was the appearance of Madhavacharya, and Kadamba Maharaj gave a very wonderful class on the appearance of Madhavacharya. 2 days ago. And yesterday was the appearance of Ramanujacharya. So it's quite interesting. I was reading Navadvip Mahatmya by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he explains how the acharyas of the four Vaishnava Sampradayas, this is Ramanujacharya, Madhavacharya, Vishnu Swami, and Nimbarkacharya, they all met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They all at some point in their lives went on pilgrimage to Navadvip. And of course they weren't contemporaries of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but through his mercy, Mahaprabhu gave each of them darshan. And so he instructed each of the acharyas to continue on with their teaching. So of course they surrendered to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, And they understood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan. He's the source of all incarnations. He's the source of Lord Vishnu and all the incarnations. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told them to continue to preach their various philosophies. He instructed them to continue, and he told them that he would come and he would take two key elements from each of those four philosophies, and in this way establish his own Achinta Bheda Bheda type of philosophy. So this was very interesting. So they're all Gaura Bhaktas in this way. And I just wanted to go through which principles Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took from each of these sampradayas. And actually, it's interesting how each of the acharyas appeared in Gaura Lila and were actual personalities in Gaura Lila, and this is explained in the Gaur Gunadesha Deepika. So Ramanujacharya, of course, Lakshmi is the head of the sampradaya. He was reborn as Ananta Shesh, who lived in Vallabhacharya's house in Gaur Lila. So it's described actually that Ramanujacharya departed the world twice. He left first at the age of about 100, but his followers and disciples were so distraught and desired so much for his association that actually he came back to life. This is quite interesting. I found that principle quite interesting. But it's explained that Ramanujacharya is actually an incarnation of Lord Balaram, of Lakshman. And so he is non-different to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not limited. He can appear again and again and again. Krishna says, Sambhavami yuge yuge. So Ramanujacharya left at 100 and then came back and then gave his association for another 20 to 25 years. And then he actually left. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually explains that this philosophy of Ramanujacharya is the closest to our own philosophy of the Brahma Madhava Gaudiya Sampradaya. So it's the closest. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took two key principles from Ramanujacharya. The first is a principle of unalloyed devotion, of pure bhakti. So of course Rupa Goswami explains Anya Bhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadya Navritam Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilnam Bhaktiruttama. That pure devotional service is free of karma and jnana. Karmakand, Jnanakand, Kevala Visharaband. That anything which has any mix of karma or jnana, any mix of fruit of activity, the desire for some fruit of result, or any speculative knowledge, or any mystic yoga, or anything apart from pure bhakti, that is simply a pot of poison. So this is explained by Narottam Das Thakur. So this is pure devotion, which is really established by Ramanujacharya. And the second principle that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu takes from Ramanujacharya is service to the Vaishnavas, service to the devotees. And of course this is such a fundamental aspect of our Krishna consciousness movement. Narottam Das Thakur says, Tandera Charana Sevi Bhakta Chanivash Janma Janma Hoy Eya Bilash. That he prays, Narottam Das Thakur prays, that I only want, please let me always stay in the association of the Vaishnavas. Birth after birth, this is his desire, that whatever situation he is in, he remains in the association of the Vaishnavas. And in this way, one is able to serve the Vaishnavas. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Gopi Parthu Padakamalayur Das Das Anudas. We are simply a servant of the devotees, and in this way we can become trained to serve Krishna. So the material world is like a training ground to eventually be able to serve Krishna. So if we develop a real service attitude to serve the Vaishnavas, then naturally we will be desirous to serve Krishna. So Madhavacharya. Madhavacharya is Murari Gupta. So Madhavacharya appears as Murari Gupta in Chaitanya Leela. And from the philosophy of Madhavacharya, as was explained a couple of days ago in class, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took the philosophies of defeating the Mayavad philosophy. Madhavacharya was very staunchly against the Mayavad philosophy. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada explains in one purport that 98% of all people, of all religionists and philosophers, are contaminated with the Mayavad philosophy. 98%, so almost everyone that we meet will be contaminated in some way, shape or form with the Mayavad philosophy. So the idea of wanting to merge with the Lord, or the idea that the Lord is simply Maya, this is the Mayavad philosophy. But we also see it, the tinges of Mayavad philosophy can also be seen in the desire to be independent, the desire not to surrender to the Lord. And of course, Prabhupada came to extinguish, to vanquish this Mayavad philosophy in its various shapes and forms. And so we chant very often, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine, that Prabhupada has come to the Western world in order to defeat the Mayavad philosophy and the Voidist philosophy. So this was Prabhupada's key mission, very important, to defeat this Mayavad philosophy. And the second principle that Madhvacharya is taken, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is taken from Madhvacharya, is the worship of the deity of Krishna. So how important the deity is in our lives. This is a key aspect of destroying the Mayavad philosophy and actually understanding the Lord to be with form and really developing that personal conception of the Lord, really relating to Krishna as a person, as a personality who we can relate to and engage in a loving, devotional, two-way relationship with. So from Vishnu Swami, he appeared as Vallabha Bhatt in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela. So again, another very intimate associate of the Lord. And from him, we take the total dependence on Krishna. So the idea that we have to be totally dependent on Krishna. So Sanatana Goswami explains, Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam rikshakshyatiti vishvaso goptite varnam tatha atma nikshepa karpanye sadvidha sharnagati. He explains rakshishyatiti vishvaso, that one has to be dependent on the Lord and have faith in the Lord's shelter and protection. So this is very important in a devotee's life. And the second principle is the principle of spontaneous devotional service, the Rag Marg. So this is another principle which is taken from Vishnu Swami, the second principle. That eventually we have to become qualified to take to Raganuga Bhakti. So through the process of regulative devotional service, according to the rules and regulations as is described in the Nectar Devotion, one will eventually come to the stage of spontaneous devotional service, where there is some attachment, some natural attachment to the Lord. One can then engage in Raga Nuga Bhakti. And finally, there's Nimbarkacharya. He is Keshava Kashmiri, according to Gaur Ganodesha Deepika. Nimbarkacharya. So he, from him, we take, very interestingly, we take the principle of exclusive shelter of Radharani. So of course, as was explained, Madhvacharya simply focused on worship of Krishna. This was his focus. And there was no real mention of Radharani in his philosophy and in his ideals. So for example, if you see Udupi Krishna, there is simply only Krishna. In the Madhava Sampradaya, there's Udupi Krishna in South India. But from Nimbarkacharya, we understand the need to take shelter of Radharani, Radharani being the foremost devotee of Krishna. So, the divine consort of the Lord is very much important in our philosophy, and very much central. And the second principle that we take from Nimbarkacharya is the exalted status of the love of the gopis for Krishna. And so we understand that the 10th canto is the Sumam Bunam, is the essence of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But within that is described that the cantos, the chapters 29 to 33, the Panchadhyaya, really describe this pure love of the gopis for Krishna. And so this is a very important principle which is taken again from Nimbarkacharya. So it's interesting that the four acharyas, the four Vaishnava Sampradayas, Prabhupada very often describes them as bona fide Sampradayas. So it's interesting to see why are they bona fide sampradayas, because they're all within the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They had all taken shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so in essence, although they focused on the worship of Lakshmi Narayan, or it seemed that way generally speaking, they still internally they understood that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all others are emanations, are expansions of Vishnu. So within Vedic culture, within Hindu culture very often, this isn't a very easily understood concept, because the general concept is that Vishnu is the Supreme and all others are expansions of Vishnu. But it's very important for us to understand as Gaudiya Vaishnavas that Krishna is the Supreme. In the first canto, 3rd chapter, it's explained, Ete chamsa kalapumsa, Krishna stu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is Bhagavan Swayam. He is the Supreme, the source of all other incarnations. It's described that He is the original candle, and all others are candles, but are replicas of that original candle. This is an example or an analogy which is given. So, the Acharyas, these 4 Vaishnava Acharyas, they were understanding internally that Krishna is the Supreme, but externally they were proposing Lakshmi Narayan to be the Supreme. And it's understood, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains, that the reason for this is because they were really looking to help to liberate those who were followers of Lakshmi and Narayan. So although they understood Krishna to be the Supreme, they were aiding those who held Lakshmi Narayan close in their hearts, so that those who were devotees in that way, they could return to Vaikuntha and return to the particular planet corresponding to their deity, their worshipful deity. So that is the Vaishnavacharya summarized. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, when he came, he took each of these principles from the philosophy of the 4 Vaishnavacharyas, and in this way established the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. And so when 200 to 300 years later, the efficacy of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya was very much refuted and challenged, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur sent his foremost disciple Baladev Vidyabhushan to Jaipur, to Golta, in order to defend the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, the Brahma Madhava Gaudiya Sampradaya. And so he established, first of all, that we take principles from each of the existing 4 recognized Vaishnava Sampradayas. And he wrote the Govinda Bhashya. So he explained that he was inspired by Govinda Dev in Jaipur. And he inspired him to write the Govinda Bhashya. And very quickly, within 2 or 3 days or a week, he was able to write a treatise which really established the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. And in that way he was able to defend and establish our Sampradaya. And so it's thanks to him that we're still here, in many ways. And so Prabhupada dedicates his Bhagavad Gita to Baladev Vidyabhushan. We see that at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada writes a note of thanks, in essence, to Baladev Vidyabhushan, and glorifies the Govinda Bhashya, which was inspired by Govinda Dev. So I'd like to end there. Are there any questions or comments?